And this is the one that's causing all the trouble.
Burmese pythons, giant constrictors native to Asia, became a nuisance in Florida after 1992.
Florida has a snake problem so insane it's quietly costing America $120 billion every single year. Burmese pythons have taken over the Everglades. We're talking hundreds of thousands of massive snakes slithering where they absolutely don't belong. People have tried hunting them, removing them, even turning it into a sport, and still, they're winning. So here's the question nobody can stop asking. Why don't we just eat them? Sounds logical, right? But wait till you hear why that simple idea turns dark, dangerous, and honestly shocking. Stick with me, because the ending changes everything. How Florida's python problem began. Florida's python invasion did not happen overnight, and officials explained that the roots of the problem stretched all the way back to the early 1990s, quietly building into one of the most difficult wildlife management crises in American history. Many people today ask how a massive snake from Southeast Asia ended up ruling large parts of the Everglades, and the answer turned out to be a mix of bad timing, human choices, and a landscape that welcomed the species almost too well. Everything shifted in August 1992 when Hurricane Andrew tore through South Florida as a Category 5 storm, leaving destruction that went far beyond damaged homes and broken roads. Wildlife experts explained that the storm wiped out exotic animal facilities across Miami-Dade County, including reptile breeding centers and private zoos. Cages collapsed, fences failed, and entire collections of non-native animals disappeared into the chaos. Burmese pythons were among the escapees, along with other large constrictors. Some facility owners admitted that entire inventories vanished, while other operations never officially reported losses at all, which left experts unable to calculate how many snakes entered the wild during those days. That uncertainty raised an unsettling question. How many pythons actually slipped into the Everglades during that single disaster? Even before the hurricane, another issue had already been growing beneath the surface. Wildlife officials explained that the exotic pet trade played a major role long before Andrew arrived. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Burmese pythons became trendy pets, sold as calm, beautiful snakes that seemed manageable when young. Many buyers did not fully understand that a snake starting at just a few feet long could grow beyond 20 feet and weigh more than 200 pounds. As years passed and snakes grew larger, stronger, and harder to handle, owners began facing an uncomfortable reality. What happened when a pet could no longer be controlled? In many cases, owners chose release over responsibility. Pythons were quietly let go near canals, swamps, and park edges, especially around the Everglades. Wildlife officials also noted that some snakes escaped during transport or slipped out of homes through unsecured enclosures. These repeated releases added to the population little by little, creating a problem that went mostly unnoticed at first. Regulations on exotic pets eventually arrived, but experts agreed that the rules came far too late to stop the damage already done. By the early 2000s, biologists began confirming something alarming. Breeding populations had become established. That discovery changed everything. A new question emerged. How could a foreign species thrive so easily in Florida? The answer pointed straight to the Everglades itself. Experts explained that the subtropical climate closely matched the python's native environment in Southeast Asia. Warm temperatures, seasonal rains, and endless wetlands created perfect conditions. Food was everywhere. Mammals, birds, and reptiles had no evolutionary history with such a powerful predator and lacked defenses. The Everglades also offered vast stretches of remote land that humans rarely reached, making detection and removal incredibly difficult. Adult pythons faced almost no natural predators, allowing survival rates to stay high. Reproduction added another layer of trouble, as female pythons could lay dozens of eggs in a single clutch.
Female Burmese can lay dozens of eggs at a time.
Sometimes approaching 100. Each successful nest multiplied the problem faster than removal efforts could keep up. Adaptability became another key reason for success. Wildlife experts explained that Burmese pythons handled freshwater and brackish environments with ease, allowing spread through marshes, canals, and waterways. Strong swimming abilities made rivers and flooded areas easy pathways instead of barriers. A single snake could travel long distances and quietly colonize new territory. That raised another troubling question. How could containment ever succeed when movement came so naturally to the species? Every advantage seemed to favor the python. Stealth hunting, powerful constriction, long lifespan, and patience allowed silent domination of the ecosystem. As years passed, scientists began noticing dramatic declines in native wildlife populations. Raccoons, rabbits, foxes, and even deer became harder to find in areas with heavy python presence. These changes reshaped the Everglades food web, triggering ripple effects that scientists continued to study. The invasion was no longer just about snakes. The issue became about balance, responsibility, and lessons learned too late. Experts emphasized that the crisis grew from a perfect storm of human carelessness, weak regulation, natural disaster, and an ecosystem that unknowingly offered a welcome mat. What started as exotic pets and broken cages evolved into an environmental challenge that demanded constant management, public awareness, and long-term solutions. Today, wildlife officials stress that understanding the origin of the invasion remains critical. Without that understanding, mistakes risk repeating themselves. The python problem serves as a warning about the consequences of releasing non-native species into environments where natural limits do not exist. One lingering question continues to hang over the Everglades. If such a massive ecological shift could begin with something as ordinary as pet ownership and a single hurricane, it forces an uncomfortable question to the surface. What other unseen changes might already be quietly unfolding elsewhere, right under our noses? What started as a small, almost forgettable chain of events slowly snowballed into something far bigger, reshaping an entire ecosystem in ways no one anticipated. And that's what makes this story so unsettling. The damage didn't arrive with sirens or warnings. It crept in, scale by scale, year after year. As invasive snakes spread, native species vanished, food chains collapsed, and balance turned into chaos. Scientists are still uncovering just how deep the harm goes, and some of their findings are genuinely alarming. This isn't just a story about snakes. It's a warning about how fragile nature really is. Stay with us until the very end, because the full impact and what it means for the future might surprise you more than you expect. The ecological damage caused by invasive snakes. Since becoming established in the Florida Everglades, Burmese pythons have quietly grown into one of the most destructive invasive species ever recorded in the United States, reshaping South Florida's fragile ecosystem in ways scientists are still struggling to fully understand. Originally brought into the country through the exotic pet trade, many of these massive snakes were released or escaped into the wild decades ago. What followed was not a slow adjustment into the environment, but an ecological takeover. With no natural predators capable of controlling their numbers and an endless supply of prey, Burmese pythons found the Everglades to be a perfect home. Warm temperatures, dense vegetation, and abundant wildlife allowed their population to explode, and over time, the balance of the ecosystem began to unravel. One of the most damaging aspects of the python invasion lies in how these snakes feed. Burmese pythons are what scientists describe as generalist predators, meaning they do not rely on one specific food source. Instead, almost anything that moves and fits into their mouth becomes potential prey. This feeding style has triggered what ecologists call a trophic cascade, a chain reaction that moves through multiple levels of the food web. When pythons consume large numbers of animals at one level, the effects ripple upward and downward, impacting predators, prey, and even plant life in unexpected ways. The most dramatic changes have been seen among mid-sized mammals that once thrived in the Everglades. Long-term studies comparing wildlife populations before and after the arrival of pythons reveal shocking declines. Raccoon populations have dropped by more than 99%. Opossums have fallen by nearly the same amount. Bobcats, once common, have declined by close to 90%. Marsh rabbits, cottontail rabbits, foxes, and several other species have almost completely vanished from areas where pythons have been established the longest. These animals did not disappear because of disease or habitat loss. They disappeared because they were eaten. As these mammals vanished, the effects did not stop there. Native predators that once relied on these animals for food began to suffer as well. Florida panthers, raptors such as hawks and owls, and even alligators lost key prey species that sustained them for generations. With fewer food options available, these predators faced increased competition and stress, further destabilizing the ecosystem. The removal of mid-sized mammals also altered plant growth patterns, since many of these animals once played important roles in seed dispersal and vegetation control. The Everglades food web, once complex and balanced, became thinner and more fragile. Endangered and protected species have not been spared from the python invasion. Burmese pythons have been documented preying on federally endangered animals such as wood storks and the key Largo woodrat. Birds classified as species of special concern, including white ibis and limpkins, have also been found inside python stomachs. Ground nesting birds face particular danger, since pythons easily raid nests and consume eggs, eliminating future generations before they ever hatch. This silent pressure on already vulnerable species makes conservation efforts far more difficult. One study conducted in 2015 revealed just how efficient these snakes are as hunters. Researchers released 95 marsh rabbits into areas known to be occupied by Burmese pythons and monitored their survival. Within 11 months, pythons were responsible for 77% of the rabbit deaths. This single study helped explain why rabbit populations have collapsed across much of South Florida. Rabbits reproduce quickly, yet even that natural advantage is no match for an ambush predator that can wait motionless for hours before striking. The danger posed by Burmese pythons goes beyond simple predation. Researchers have discovered that these snakes introduced an Asian lung parasite known as Rhyliatiella orientalis into Florida's ecosystem. This parasite did not evolve alongside native snake species, making it especially harmful. Native Florida snakes tend to have smaller lungs than Burmese pythons, and infections can severely impair breathing, movement, and survival. As the parasite spreads, it adds another layer of stress to native species already struggling to survive alongside this invasive predator. What makes Burmese pythons especially destructive is their extraordinary physical ability to consume prey of remarkable size. For years, scientists underestimated just how large a meal these snakes could manage. That changed when researchers documented a python swallowing a white-tailed deer weighing 77 pounds, roughly 2/3 of the snake's own body weight. This was not an isolated incident, but a clear demonstration of the python's feeding limits, or lack of them. This ability comes from unique anatomical features. Unlike most snakes, Burmese pythons have lower jawbones that are not fused at the front. This allows each side of the jaw to move independently, creating extreme flexibility.
They captured one here, not too far from here, that had a deer inside.
Combined with highly elastic skin and specialized muscles, this structure enables pythons to stretch their mouths around prey far wider than their own head. While most snakes are limited to relatively small animals, Burmese pythons can slowly work their way over animals many times larger than what would normally be possible. Because of this feeding ability, almost nothing in the Everglades is truly safe. Pythons have been found with deer, bobcats, raccoons, wading birds, and even adult alligators inside their bodies. The image of a snake consuming an apex predator like an alligator highlights just how unnatural this imbalance has become. In a healthy ecosystem, predators exist in a hierarchy that keeps populations in check. The python ignores that structure entirely. Egg consumption adds yet another layer to the damage. By eating bird eggs, pythons remove future generations before they ever enter the ecosystem. This not only reduces current population numbers, but also prevents recovery over time. For species already struggling due to habitat loss or climate pressures, this additional threat can push populations past the point of return. The long-term consequences of the Burmese python invasion are still unfolding. Efforts to control their population through organized removal programs, public hunts, and scientific tracking have had limited success. While thousands of pythons have been removed, the population remains deeply entrenched across vast areas of South Florida. The Everglades, one of the most unique ecosystems in the world, continues to change under this pressure. What makes this invasion especially troubling is that it serves as a warning. The python crisis shows how easily an introduced species can overwhelm an ecosystem when natural checks and balances are removed. It also highlights how human actions, even those that seem small at the time, can set off consequences that last for generations. The Burmese python is not just another snake hiding in the swamp. It is a living warning sign. Its quiet spread shows just how fragile an ecosystem can be once an invasive species gains a foothold, and how painfully difficult it is to reverse the damage after nature's balance is broken. Every missing animal, every altered food chain, tells part of this story. But what's happening now might surprise you. Scientists, hunters, and lawmakers are racing against time with bold and controversial solutions.
It's releasing 17 eastern indigo snakes onto the forest is part of our reintroduction project.
Stay with this story till the very end, because the efforts to control the python population reveal just how high the stakes really are. Current efforts to control the python population. Government agencies across Florida have steadily increased efforts to confront the growing python invasion, and officials have openly described the situation as one of the most serious wildlife challenges the state has ever faced.
Are you looking for an adventurous summer job? Well, how about hunting invasive Burmese pythons in the Everglades?
Over time, what began as small removal efforts has turned into a coordinated, well-funded response involving hunters, scientists, technology experts, and wildlife managers. Many people naturally ask how an invasive snake problem became so severe, and officials explain that decades of unchecked breeding allowed Burmese pythons to spread across large sections of South Florida, especially the Everglades. These snakes have few natural enemies, reproduce quickly, and feed on a wide range of animals, creating a perfect storm for ecological damage. To slow this spread, state agencies developed structured hunting programs that now operate almost like a specialized industry. The South Florida Water Management District's Python Elimination Program pays registered hunters hourly wages that range from $13 to $30.
The South Florida Water Management District is paying $8.10 an hour to hunt the slithering creatures,
depending on experience and certification level. On top of that base pay, hunters receive $50 for removing a python up to 4 feet long, with an added $25 for every additional foot. Officials explained that larger snakes pose greater risks to wildlife, which makes higher rewards necessary. Hunters also receive $200 for every verified active nest, since stopping eggs from hatching prevents dozens of future snakes from entering the ecosystem. Recently, a new incentive added even more motivation. A monthly bonus of $1,000 now goes to the hunter who removes the most pythons during that period. Many people wonder whether money really makes a difference, and officials say the answer has been clear. Participation has increased, removal numbers have climbed, and skilled hunters now treat python removal as a serious profession. The annual Florida Python Challenge reflects just how much public involvement has grown. Officials reported that the competition has expanded every year, drawing participants from across the state and beyond. The 2025 challenge broke records, with 934 participants removing 294 pythons in only 10 days. That figure surprised many observers, especially considering the difficulty of locating snakes that blend into swamp grass, hide underwater, and remain active mostly at night. Officials stressed that each snake removed matters, even if the overall population remains large. Since organized removal efforts began, more than 23,500 pythons have been taken out of Florida's natural areas. Some people ask whether that number is enough to make a real impact, and wildlife managers respond honestly. The number represents progress, not a solution. The population remains high, but unchecked growth has slowed in some regions. Agencies emphasize that without these programs, the situation would be far worse. Beyond traditional hunting, authorities have turned to creative and scientific tracking methods. One of the most promising tools involves specially trained detection dogs. These dogs locate pythons using scent rather than sight, which allows searches in thick vegetation where human eyes struggle. Field tests showed success rates between 75 and 92%, a result that impressed wildlife officials. Trainers explained that dogs can distinguish python scent from other animals and alert handlers even when snakes remain hidden underground or underwater. Many people wonder whether dogs can safely work around such large snakes, and handlers explain that safety protocols remain strict, with dogs never making direct contact. Another innovative method involves what researchers call scout pythons. These snakes receive surgically implanted radio transmitters and are released back into the wild under close monitoring. During breeding season, scout pythons naturally seek out other snakes, unknowingly leading researchers to breeding groups. This method produced dramatic results. In one season alone, researchers removed 86 adult pythons, weighing a combined total of nearly 5,000 pounds. Officials explained that removing breeding adults has a powerful impact because it reduces future population growth rather than only addressing existing snakes. Despite these efforts, the damage already caused by pythons remains severe. Wildlife experts explained that many native mammals, birds, and reptiles experienced sharp population declines after pythons became established. Raccoons, rabbits, opossums, and even deer have disappeared from some areas. However, signs of limited natural resistance have begun to appear. Alligators and bobcats, two native Everglades predators, have occasionally been observed attacking younger pythons. Officials describe these encounters as rare but encouraging. Younger snakes sometimes fall prey to these animals, especially when size differences favor the predator. Fully grown pythons, however, remain largely untouchable. Wildlife managers caution against assuming nature will fix the problem on its own. While adaptation is happening slowly, the scale of the invasion overwhelms these natural defenses. Many people ask why eradication seems impossible, even with such advanced tools and funding. Officials explain that the Everglades present unique challenges. The landscape covers vast wetlands filled with sawgrass, canals, and hidden water paths. Pythons can remain motionless for long periods and survive in conditions that limit human access. Climate conditions in South Florida also favor year-round activity, allowing snakes to feed and reproduce without long dormant seasons. Agencies stress that the goal is not total elimination, but population control. By lowering numbers, reducing breeding success, and protecting key wildlife zones, long-term balance becomes more achievable. Funding continues to grow as officials recognize the long-term nature of the problem. State budgets now allocate millions of dollars toward removal programs, research, and public outreach. Officials argue that prevention costs far less than repairing ecological damage. Losing native species disrupts tourism, hunting traditions, and ecosystem services like water filtration. Some residents question whether public money should support snake hunting, and agencies respond by pointing to measurable benefits. Reduced predation pressure allows native species to slowly recover. Increased public awareness discourages illegal pet releases, which originally contributed to the problem. Education plays an important role alongside enforcement and science. Outreach programs teach residents how to identify pythons, report sightings, and avoid releasing exotic animals. Officials emphasize that many invasive species problems begin with small human decisions that grow into massive consequences. Could earlier action have prevented this crisis? Wildlife experts believe so, but focus remains on present solutions rather than past mistakes. As efforts continue, government agencies describe the fight against Florida's python invasion as a long campaign rather than a quick battle. Every removed snake, every destroyed nest, and every tracked breeding group represents a small victory. Progress comes slowly, measured in data rather than headlines. Officials remain realistic, yet determined. The invasion did not happen overnight, and recovery will not happen overnight either. Still, even with a mix of incentives, innovation, hard science, and growing public involvement, Florida keeps pushing back against one of the toughest invasive species threats modern wildlife management has ever faced. On paper, the idea sounds almost too simple. If pythons are the problem, why not eat them? It feels logical, even practical, and many people assume it could be the ultimate fix. But the reality is far more complicated than it seems. Hidden risks, unexpected barriers, and uncomfortable truths quickly emerge once you look closer. So don't click away just yet. Watch till the very end, because this next part explains why eating invasive pythons isn't the solution most people think it is. Why eating invasive pythons isn't a widespread solution. The idea of eating pythons as a way to deal with Florida's growing snake problem often sounds simple and even clever at first, and many people have pointed out that humans have eaten invasive species before. So why not this one too? But once the full picture is explained, the idea starts to fall apart piece by piece.
They say the hunt is for a good cause, to save rabbits, raccoons, even deer that are being eaten up by all these pythons.
Supporters of the idea usually argue that turning pythons into food could reduce their numbers while also creating a new source of meat. And on the surface, that sounds practical. Yet experts repeatedly explain that several serious obstacles stand in the way, with the biggest concern being mercury contamination. Tests carried out on pythons living in the Everglades have shown mercury levels that go far beyond what health authorities consider safe for human consumption. In one widely cited example, a single python was found to contain mercury at a level of 3.5 parts per million, which is more than 3 times higher than the Food and Drug Administration's action level of 1.0 part per million. That number alone raises eyebrows, but the situation becomes even more alarming when looking at other samples, some of which show mercury concentrations more than 100 times higher than what is considered safe. This level of contamination is not random or rare, and scientists explain that it comes from the Everglades ecosystem itself, where mercury exists naturally and slowly builds up as it moves up the food chain. Small organisms absorb mercury from water and soil, larger animals eat those organisms, and over time, predators like pythons end up carrying extremely high concentrations in their bodies. A natural question often follows: if mercury is the main issue, could testing and screening make python meat safe? Experts respond by explaining that widespread testing would be expensive, time-consuming, and unreliable, given how high and unpredictable mercury levels can be from one snake to another. This alone makes the idea of regular consumption risky and hard to justify. Even if mercury were somehow removed from the equation, the physical challenge of harvesting pythons presents another major barrier that many people underestimate. The Everglades cover a massive area of dense wetlands, thick vegetation, and hard-to-reach terrain, and pythons are masters of staying hidden in this environment. Hunters often describe hours or even days of searching with little success, and this difficulty means that consistent supply would be nearly impossible. Unlike animals raised on farms or caught in predictable fishing zones, pythons do not appear on schedule and do not gather in convenient locations. Beyond locating the snakes, proper handling in the field requires training and experience.
As of Tuesday, 50 pythons have been killed by the hunters. Florida's Wildlife Commission has also announced new prizes.
Pythons must be killed and dressed carefully to avoid contamination from internal organs, bacteria, or parasites, and mistakes can easily render the meat unsafe. This is not a simple process that can be learned overnight, and specialists warn that without strict standards, risks to human health would increase rather than decrease. After harvesting, preparation introduces another layer of difficulty. Python meat is known to be tough and chewy if not handled correctly, and proper cooking requires techniques unfamiliar to most home cooks and even many professional chefs. Long marination times, slow cooking, or specialized preparation methods are often needed to make the meat palatable, which raises the question of how many people would realistically be willing to learn or adopt these methods. Beyond safety and practicality, cultural resistance plays a surprisingly powerful role in why python consumption has failed to gain traction. In the United States, snakes are generally viewed as pests, threats, or creatures to avoid, rather than as food. This perception is deeply rooted and difficult to change, and food experts often point out that what people are willing to eat is shaped just as much by culture as by logic. In some Asian countries, snake meat has a long history as part of traditional cuisine, and people grow up seeing it as normal and acceptable. In contrast, many Americans react with discomfort or even disgust at the idea of eating snake, regardless of how it is prepared. This creates a serious marketing challenge, because even if python meat were proven safe and easy to produce, convincing the public to buy and eat it would still be an uphill battle. Restaurants are unlikely to take the risk of offering a product that most customers would refuse to order, and grocery stores are even less likely to dedicate shelf space to something with such limited appeal. A common question often comes up at this point. Could education and promotion change public opinion? While education can help people understand issues, experts explain that deeply ingrained food preferences change very slowly, often over generations, not through short-term campaigns. The final obstacle, and perhaps the most overlooked one, is the complete lack of commercial infrastructure for python meat. At present, no established system exists for processing, packaging, distributing, and selling python meat on a large scale. Creating such a system would require specialized facilities designed to handle reptiles safely, trained workers, regulated inspection processes, cold storage, transportation networks, and reliable buyers. All of this costs money, and investors tend to avoid industries where demand is uncertain and risks are high. Without a steady and predictable supply of snakes, businesses cannot plan operations, and without businesses in place, supply cannot grow. This circular problem makes scaling python consumption economically unrealistic. Even supporters of python removal programs admit that current efforts focus more on population control and ecological protection than on food production. When all these factors are considered together, mercury contamination, harvesting difficulty, preparation challenges, cultural resistance, and lack of infrastructure, the idea of solving Florida's python problem through consumption begins to look far less practical than it first appears. While eating invasive species has worked in some cases, experts consistently explain that pythons present a unique combination of risks and barriers that make widespread human consumption unlikely to ever become a safe, popular, or economically viable solution. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.